We might need to use this right here, the Rotor Remover 9000. Hey, what's up YouTube? Dan the Fix-It Man. Got another quick video here for you. I'm going to show you how to change your front brake pads and your front brake rotors on a 2019 Mercedes Sprinter. Now this is the 2500. You can see our brakes are totally worn out. Even our rotor right here, there's a nice little lip here. So we're going to swap out the pads and the rotors. Now the first thing that I like to do is push the caliper pistons back inside the caliper, which will make room for the new thicker pads and of course the thicker rotor. And there's lots of ways to do that, but what I like to do is get a small prybar or even a screwdriver and put it in through this opening and just pull that towards you, and that will pry the pads up against those pistons, and that will push them back inside the caliper. Now that's also going to push the brake fluid back up through this line into the master cylinder. So we need to pop the hood and go take a look at the master cylinder reservoir and make sure that that fluid is not going to overflow. Now as an alternate method, you could also take off this rubber cap and put a little hose on there and crack open that bleeder screw and push the old fluid out as you push the caliper pistons back in. That's one way to cycle through your brake fluid, which should be changed frequently. Just double check your manufacturer specifications on that. But when you do that method, you do risk the chance of air getting into the system, and so you may have to bleed the brakes when you're done. The way that I'm going to do it, we won't have to bleed the brakes when we're done. So let's go take a look up top and make sure that we have enough room in that master cylinder so we're not going to overflow that fluid. All right, so here's our master cylinder, and you can see that our fluid level is really low, way down here close to the minimum. That's actually good. That means that somebody has not been topping this off as the brakes have been wearing down. So we'll be able to push that fluid backwards without having to remove any fluid. A lot of people ask me if you need to take this lid off before pushing the caliper piston back in, and you really don't. There is maybe a little bit of trapped air in there, but because brake fluid absorbs moisture, it's hygroscopic. It basically absorbs moisture, and that causes it to degrade and go bad. So I like to not risk exposing that whenever possible to new air, which will have more moisture and it will absorb that moisture. So I usually like to keep that lid on unless we're having to remove any fluid or if we're changing the fluid. Again, you can also see that this fluid is pretty clean and clear, so we're just going to push that backwards through the system and we're good to go. So now that we know we have enough room, we can push these caliper pistons back in, and the way that I like to do it is with a prybar or even a stout screwdriver in through this opening. You can also take the caliper off and use the caliper pushback tool or wind back tool, or you can use a large C-clamp. A lot of times that will work. Now, if you've seen any of my other brake videos, you know I really like this Mayhew Dominator prybar. It's a short, stout, straight prybar, and I really like using it. But a lot of times, like this won't fit in. So in the past, I'll usually just grab a stout screwdriver and put it in through there and do that. But I was at the SEMA show in Vegas this year, and I stopped by the Mayhew booth, and that's when I saw these Dominator demo drivers. Basically, this is a screwdriver prybar hybrid. It's the combined strength of a prybar with the usefulness of a screwdriver. Mayhew actually sent these to me and asked me to give them a try, so just want to say thanks to Mayhew, and I'll of course get a link to these in the description. But let's try this big one here and see how that works. Made in the USA, gotta love that. Let's give this a try. Now all I'm doing is just prying this against the pad and pulling this towards me. Now I'm going to shift over here in between the inside pad and the rotor and see if I can pry those caliper pistons the rest of the way in. That worked great. I like these. You see we've got all kinds of room in there now. So now we can take off this caliper. All right, now these rubber caps right here cover the caliper slide pin bolts. So all we have to do is just kind of wiggle this off like that, and then grab a 6mm Allen and put it in through that little opening, and then we can loosen and remove these. Same with the bottom one here. Just a slightly different style, has a little pull tab on it. You just kind of pull the caliper out, it'll expose the head of these, and then we can pull them out. Now these are obviously different. This one here is in the top and this one in the bottom. We'll set those aside. All right, now we can take off the caliper. Be careful, you don't want to let this drop or dangle from the brake line. I'm just grabbing this little hook here. I'm gonna see if we can find a place to hang this over here. There we go. I just have this hooked on this little bracket over there. It's kind of like on the bump stop. You really just don't want to let that fall or dangle from the brake line. All right, and then we can pull out the old brake pads. Definitely got money's worth out of these ones. All right, I'm moving this caliper down here and just putting this hook on the sway bar so we have a little bit more room, because now we need to remove these two caliper bracket bolts. These are 21mm. Now I'm gonna temporarily just pop off this little clip right here, and that is going to give me access, hopefully, for the impact. Just taking this off of its mount and putting this out of the way So hopefully now we can get on here. Nope, not quite. Let's try a little wobble. Now this is the 2960 Milwaukee with a Tecton impact wobble. I'm gonna see if we can get this one off. This is a 21 millimeter. Got it. Try the bottom one. All right, and then we can take these out the rest of the way. Now here you wanna have one hand on this bracket so it doesn't drop to the ground. There we go. All right, now we need to take off the old rotor, and that's held on by one T30 Torx screw. That's just spinning the rotor, so I'm going to put this same Dominator pry bar here in the end and hold it steady. There we got it. Now sometimes you get lucky and these come right off. This one has got a ton of corrosion on the hub here, and so it's not coming off. So we might need to use this right here. This is called the Rotor Remover 9000. You can also call this a Tanya Harding. Let's give it a shot here. Ah, we got lucky. That's awesome. I thought for sure that was going to be stuck a lot worse than it was. But you see right here, we've got a really sharp lip on the outside edge. Even here on the inside, really worn out rotor. So this is trash. Now before I put on the new rotor, I'm going to clean this hub, all of this corrosion and rust off of here, and then I'm going to coat that with anti-seize. I'm going to use a wire wheel on a drill. If you're going to use something like that, make sure you wear some safety glasses. I might as well clean out the inside here too. All right, now we got that cleaned up. We're just gonna brush this with some anti-seize. This is the Permatex anti-seize. Hopefully that will prevent the new rotor from getting stuck and maybe slow down some of this rust and corrosion on here. Pretty rusty for a California vehicle. I should mention that the wheel was also stuck on. I'm sure that had to do with just the same shoulder of rust. Maybe it was bonding it to the wheel. Now these rotors come packed in some protective oil, so it's important that you grab some brake cleaner and wipe them off. I usually just spray some brake cleaner on a little paper towel here. All right, and then we can put the new rotor on. Right there. Got to line that up so that we can put that little Torx screw back in. This looks like it had a little bit of remnants of thread lock on there. I'm going to put a little bit more, just a little dab on there as well to help hold that in place. Thread that one back in. Just going to put this same Prybar screwdriver here in the end to hold that steady while we snug this. Now don't get too carried away. You don't want to strip that. Also, you don't want to make that too difficult for somebody to take off in the future, but that should be good. All right, now we need to prepare this caliper bracket to be put back on. We're going to change out these little clips or retainer clips, abutment clips. Just pull those out. Now the new clips that we have are different style. They're connected. But before we put those on, we're gonna brush these to make sure we don't get any corrosion building up underneath, and we're gonna coat these with some protective grease as well. I'm gonna use the wire wheel again, so remember your safety glasses here. Now just to protect that area from rusting, I'm going to brush that with a little bit of this synthetic caliper grease. What this does is it just is more of a protectant, and it will prevent rust from building up underneath those clips. We just don't want those to lift or cause the brakes to bind. And then we can put the new clips in. You do need to make sure that this little center part here gets pressed in. Otherwise these won't sit all the way down in the channel like they're supposed to. I had to look up a couple other videos just to see if I was doing something wrong here, because that doesn't look right. But that's how I saw a few other people do it, so I'm gonna go with that. Now before we put the bracket on, I'm gonna clean up these bolts here real quick. You can see that there's some remnants of thread locker on there, so I'm gonna use some blue thread locker. This is the medium strength. Just a little bit's all you need. All right, and then we can put the caliper bracket on. Okay, I'm just gonna zip that on for now. And we can go ahead and torque those caliper bracket bolts to 127 foot-pounds. All right, now we can put the new pads in. Now, a lot of times you'll see in my other videos, I usually brush the back of the brake pad or the back of the brake pad shim with a little bit of that silicone ceramic extreme. This is this stuff right here. This is really good to help dampen some noise and vibrations. And you can even put a little bit on the ends here. You really don't want too much because those just need to be able to slide inside these channels. If you put a lot of grease on there, it'll catch a lot of brake dust. So I'm going to put these on first and then we'll just brush the back. There we go. These are kind of a pain to push in because of this aftermarket clip design, but they're not stuck, they're not bound up, that's good. All right, now I'm gonna brush the pads with this Permatex Silicone Ceramic Extreme. This just seems to help dampen some of the vibrations that cause brake noise. Just a thin coating where the pistons and the caliper are gonna make contact with those shims. All right, now I'm gonna pull the caliper and set it up here and kind of prop it up here on the top while we pull out the slide pins. Now remember, the top and the bottom are a slightly different design, but on this one here, the bottom one, we're gonna see if we can pull it out this direction. Just pull back on that rubber boot, slide that out. We're just gonna clean this one up. All right, now this one was actually pretty dry. If you look inside the boot, you can see there is a little bit of remnants of grease, but I'm just gonna use this same synthetic caliper grease on this. It's really good for slide pins. Just a nice coating on this. And then we're gonna push this in from the back. Just push it all the way out. Now you're gonna have to make sure that the boot catches that lip, which it did. That looks perfect. Now on the top one here, this bolt is also the slide pin. So we do need to clean this up. And then this is where we're gonna use some of that same synthetic caliper grease. Get a nice coating on this. All right, and that's ready to go back in. Inspect the boots, make sure everything looks good. If I flip this over here, it's also always a good idea to inspect the face of the pistons here and inspect these boots. Make sure that they're not hung up on anything. And you can also just brush this caliper out just to make sure that that's clean. You could also apply this silicone ceramic extreme directly to the contact points of the caliper and on the contact points here of the piston. I think it's just out of habit that I put it on the back of the pads, but either way is fine. As long as you just inspect this, make sure that this is clean and that those boots are not bound up or anything. Sometimes a little bit of air will get trapped in there and you can pull that boot out and that will allow that air to escape, but this looks like it's ready to go back on. Just make sure that you don't twist that brake line around. Just make sure that you put it back on the way it was. Now here I'm pushing out on the bottom slide pin and also pushing out on this boot right here to make sure that that doesn't get caught on anything. Now I do see a little remnants of thread lock on this, so I'm going to put just a little bit on this slide pin as well. That's now ready to go back in. Just be careful on that thread lock that you just push that all the way through. See if we can get that one started. Now on this bottom bolt here that goes through the slide pin, same thing, just a couple drops of that medium strength thread locker, and then we'll put that one in, see if we can get that started. And then we want to torque these to 25 foot-pounds. And then we can put the cap back on. And same with this one here on the bottom. Just stretch that on. All right, this side's done. Let's go do the other side and then we'll wrap this up. All right, now here we are on the passenger side, and really the only difference is this right here, this little sensor. So you can see right here, this little bolt that's bolted into the caliper, that's what holds this little mount that holds the sensor in place. And you will need an E socket for that, or an E Torx socket. This one is an E8. Let's take that off and get it out of the way. Now the other end of this harness is just under this little plug, which is just a little rubber cap for your bleeder screw. That's pretty easy to take off. There we go. That's just a little rubber cap. Now that kind of holds this harness in place, and it's also clipped in over here, which I'm also going to remove that clip. It's pretty easy. You just push this little tab back. But I needed that out of the way to get to that bolt anyway. So now this is nice and free. Now, if you're reusing this sensor, you're gonna wanna be really careful with this, but ours has already worn down and it caused the indicator light to go on. So we're not gonna be reusing this, but I'm still just gonna disconnect it by pulling this straight out. I'm gonna tuck this one over here out of the way. Now, if you're gonna reuse this sensor, I suggest that you take the caliper off and then take it off carefully off the old pad, and you might be able to reuse it. Our kit came with new sensors, so I'm not worried about it. I'm still just gonna use the pry bar right in the same opening. I'm not worried about that sensor. It's already rubbed on the pad, so we already know that it's trash and it's not gonna be able to be reused. So let's just do that right now. All right, now I'm just gonna shift this over to the inside here, and we're going to pry in between the pad and the rotor on the inside. Looks like we got the pistons pushed all the way back in. Can pop off these caps here. There we go. Pull off this caliper. I'm going to do the same thing here, and just going to hook it right over here on the sway bar, just so we're not dangling from that brake line. And take a look at that pad there. That's about as thin as you can go. And here's our wear sensor. See, a lot of times you can just wedge a small screwdriver in there and just kind of gently wiggle that out. Now you can't really see it because it's all crumbled apart, but the little wire contacts had already worn through. Basically, once those wear through, it causes the light to go on. Plan ahead and make sure that your kit does have the replacement sensors. Again, they're only on the passenger side on this one, and the kit came with 2 new sensors. Maybe there are some models that have them on both sides, I'm not sure. But there you go. So if we get lucky on these as well with this 2960 Milwaukee. Awesome. Perfect. And I'm just gonna use this to hold the rotor steady while I take out this T30. Got it. All right, now the moment of truth. Will this rotor come off? Now we know it's going to be stuck. Both sides, the wheels were also stuck. I had to kick them off pretty hard because of this hub right here. There's so much corrosion there, it almost looks like little mini spot welds. But we'll see if this will come off. Give it a few whacks with the Tanya Harding Rotor Remover 9000. Yeah, we're getting it. Perfect. Again, don't know how well this lip is showing up, but that's just terrible. These rotors are worn out completely. We'll clean this hub up. Again, for being a California vehicle, that is just a lot of rust. What a mess that was. Hit that with some of the anti-seize. That'll do. All right, let's clean up this bracket. Pop off these old clips. We can put our caliper bracket back on. Now these ones are tough. You really got to just force that. But once they get past that lip, see, they're not locked in. They're still going to be able to move. Just these aftermarket anti-rattle or abutment clips, they definitely are not the best design, but it does work. So see, if you spin it, squeeze it, and then let go, it still spins easily. So they're not binding in there. They're looking good. Now, just a quick note on this sensor, you can actually put this on after the caliper's on. You can still reach in there and put it on. And I think that's what I'm gonna do just so that it's out of the way. So I'm gonna set this aside for right now. We'll come back and put that on after I get the caliper on. All right, now we can put the little wear sensor on. Okay, so you see down in there, there's the edge of the pad. All we need to do is just put it in and push it on right there. Once you get it lined up, just push it on. You'll feel it seat. And then we'll bring this part of the sensor, remember that went right underneath here and clipped in place on the little brake bleeder cover. And our plastic clip here will just slide back in like so. And then here, it's pretty simple. It's just 2 prongs. Just push it together. Just make sure you push it all the way in till it seats. And then this little bolt right here holds that little connector. Just make that snug. And you're done. That's both sides complete. The first side, remember, does not have the wear sensor. The only reason I filmed this other side is because of that. I just wanted to make sure I showed that little wear sensor. Pretty hard to reuse those, remember, because they do get so hot and the plastic gets really brittle. By the time you go to take that off, it's pretty likely to crumble. Now, it's very important before you head out, you do need to step on the brake pedal several times, which will push the caliper pistons back out, pressing those pads up against the rotor where they need to be. When you do this, don't press the brake pedal all the way to the floor. That can damage the seals in your master cylinder. Just press it down about halfway several times until it feels firm. And then don't forget to double check the fluid level in your master cylinder as well. Make sure that the brake fluid is all topped off where it needs to be. I hope you liked the video. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you don't mind. That does help me out. I'll get a link in the description where you can pick up some of these same parts and tools used in the video as well. Thanks so much for watching and good luck.